You know, when we look back in history, there's a lot of things, are there not, where, the royals get accused, particularly the ladies, of not moving with the times. I don't know if you remember, but the late and brilliant Queen Elizabeth II, way back in the 60s and 70s, was attacked, of course, by the women's lib movement. But of course, she was liberated. Could you get anybody more powerful than this lady? So I never really understood that argument, if I'm honest, And of course, Princess Margaret really led her own life, didn't she, to great aplomb when you think about it. People don't realise that now, looking at that. But of course, during the sort of decades, it's been said, of course, that a lot of royal women just stood behind their men, nodding, waving and waiting their turn. But that truly wasn't always the case. You see, when you go back to the Victorian era, Queen Victoria was a woman really who was, really ahead of her time. And the difficulty that she had was that she was surrounded by men who told her what to do, what to say, what to think. But of course, she was very stubborn, as we found out, and literally held her own. Of course, really, she had a great support, as in the latter of decades later, Queen Elizabeth had with Prince Philip. She totally relied on Prince Albert. But way back in 1897, something that even, none of the courtiers and of course the Prime Minister of the time could have predicted was that in fact she was liberating women far before even the term had been invented. Let me explain. Maury, good to see you. Thank you so much for your time today. You all right? I'm hiding out the window in this beautiful area here. It's quite nice, isn't it? This beautiful wood door. Yes. I can't say where it is because it's a private place, but it's got a canopy. It's keeping the rain off. That's what matters, isn't it? It's not cold though. I do like to share these things with you. It's windy and rainy, but actually it's not cold. So it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because you've got all these bundle things on. Suddenly you're thinking, yes, I'm having, yes, a bit of a hot flush. Well, no, but you know what I mean. You get too warm. Don't be cheeky. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you suddenly think, goodness, I'm too warm here. That's the problem, yes. Now, of course, a lady who really did warm things up, literally over 60 years, was none other than Queen Victoria. And as I've told you of recent lates with our, history slots, the thing that I like about Queen Victoria was she really was the first at many different things, the first royal to travel on a railway and really break the barrier for people who were like, not sure I should do that. Is it safe? Once she'd been on, then everybody followed suit. It's like the Victorian seaside, isn't it? We all went to the seaside basically on the back of those people taking the sea air. Someone wrote in the comments actually the other day, did of course the Victorians invent the Christmas tree? Well, essentially, yes. The way that we celebrate Christmas now was put together really by Albert and Victoria, sending Christmas cards. And this was because the penny black came in, which meant that you could afford a stamp to send a card to any relatives, that sort of stuff. So they really did invent many different things. But in 1897, there was something rather radical that she couldn't really, as hard as she tried, couldn't get pushed through. And I wanted to share this with you because it actually features a brilliant actress from America called Minnie Palmer. Now, Minnie had had incredible success around the world in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, over here in Great Britain, across Europe, in, a succession of wonderful sort of like comedy plays. Never really got it on Broadway, but she did still very well touring around the other states. Now, while she was over here in 1897, she shocked everybody. Oh yes, because she was the person that literally became the very first lady chauffeur. And you see, going back and forth to the theatre, she could have a chauffeur. That was the thing. But she'd bought the motor car. She wanted to drive it herself. Strong, independent woman, right? Love it. Now, what happened was, Queen Victoria thought, wow, this is kind of good. So she went along to see a performance of Minnie at the theatre, a rare outing, apparently it was pointed out. And she was inspired by the lady because she said, look, there's hardly anything of her. How could she possibly drive the car? Apparently Queen Victoria just couldn't quite get over this. And then it was put to this lady that, would you like to perhaps drive the Queen somewhere under instruction, of course? And the idea really was to draw attention to a particular thing that Queen Victoria was doing. And she knew by having the very first royal lady chauffeur, that would be the key. And also, Millie being an actress thought, wow, this is a great bit of publicity. Driving the Queen around, not a bad idea. But as ever in the 11th hour, these things take a tumble. Tumble because the courtiers basically said, no, it wouldn't be safe, people wouldn't accept it, people would think you're being frivolous, and they literally put as many blocks in her path as they could. Now, as I've told you before, her son, Edward, didn't always see eye to eye with Queen Victoria. But on this they did, and he thought it was a terrific idea, but even he couldn't get it pushed through. Many people suggest that the Prime Minister of the time really didn't want the attention taken away from him. You've got to remember, the Prime Minister, even then, really was slightly more powerful than royalty. And so Queen Victoria, sadly, had to relinquish this idea. Sadly for Millie, he never came around again, Obviously that opportunity went. She, of course, went on to carry on with a wonderful, successful career, finally retiring to a man who was incredibly rich and living a life in a sumptuous, stately home. So not all bad, really. But it just goes to show that even back then, in the 1890s, Queen Victoria was ahead of her time. But as ever, some people might suggest others were holding her back. What a shame, eh? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.